This is my 2023 Chicago Marathon race recap. It's going to get real specific. If you're looking for a more general marathon racing tips and tricks, check out my other video on how to perfect race day. You can also check out the Chicago Marathon official video. It's a little more cinematic than this one, but we're going to get really specific into the nitty-gritty of race day and beyond. I will include timestamps in the thumbnails so you can just check them down there, I think. Also, please subscribe if you could. That'd be huge. Let's get into it. First thing I want to talk about is actually not even the race itself, but getting to Chicago. I'm from Denver, Colorado, so Chicago's a pretty accessible city. However, one really important note that you need to take into account is there's two airports there. There's O'Hare and there's Midway. They kind of on a map look like they're similar in distance to downtown, which is where the race is. Fly into Midway. That's my first huge piece of advice. We flew into O'Hare. It was a process to get downtown. And that brings me to my next point. We flew in the day before the race. So the race was on Sunday. We flew in on Saturday. Usually I'm there a few days beforehand. However, this is just kind of how it worked, and it worked out really well, actually. I liked having a really steady routine the days leading up to leaving, and then just being able to fly there in the morning. Like I said, Chicago's really accessible, so that wasn't a big deal at all. And getting there, getting to the expo, and then you turn around and it's already race day. I've had experiences in the past where I've gotten there 2, 3, 4 days before a race, and you don't really get to enjoy the city you're in. You are kind of sitting around, but you also want to do things. It's a tough spot to be in. So I actually really liked flying in the day before the race. If it's not a super long flight and it's easily accessible like a place like Chicago, I'd say do that. But worked well for me. That's really all I'm sharing is what worked well for me. The hotel. We booked a hotel on the Millennium Mile. I always want to call it the Miracle Mile, which is really close to Grant Park, which is where the race starts and ends. So that worked out so well. We stayed at the Intercontinental, really beautiful hotel, and it happened to be one of the cheaper ones for the race. So it all worked out really well. I was able to walk to the race start on race morning. We were able to walk back to the hotel after I finished up. I just would say stay as close to the park as possible. You'll be thankful you did. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about race morning now, really getting into race day logistics. First of all, I did carb load for the race. I started on Thursday. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I was eating a ton of carbs. I was eating a little bit of protein and fat, but not much, to the tune of about 500-600 plus grams of carbs. I kept that going the day before the race. We had a nice pasta dinner the night before. Had a little bolognese sauce on there, delicious. And then we got to race morning. So I woke up 3 hours before the race, started at 7:30. So I was up about 4:45. I guess that's 2 hours and 45 minutes. I immediately ate. So that was the first thing I did was I made a few packets, 3 packets of pre-made oatmeal. It's about 75 to 90 grams of carbs in there. And then I drank some Tailwind, about 50 more grams of carbs. That has electrolytes in it as well. All said and done, it was about 125 grams of carbs, about 2.5 hours before race start, so 5 a.m. I actually went to bed again after I ate. So I ate, I kind of like went we had a nice comfy chair in the room, laid down, slept for about another 30 or so minutes, and then got ready to leave for the race. Got on all of my stuff. What I was wearing for the race, I had on some Balega quarter-length socks. They were a little thicker, which I like. I was wearing the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 shoes in that white and gold colorway. Awesome, awesome shoes. I'll put the link in the description below. And then I had on Nike Trail half tights, the Lava Loops half tights. These are like my all-time go-to running bottoms. I used to wear shorts for the longest time with compression shorts. They were fine, but I love how tight the tights are, and they just keep everything, really tight to your body, everything that's in your pockets. And these tights have 2 pockets, actually 3 pockets, one in the back as well. So goos and everything just stay tight. They're not flopping all around as you're running, which I really, really like. I wore a Nike just running tank top on top. And then I had, of course, my Nike Dry Fit Hollaaa gang hat on top. So that was everything I wore for race morning. Oh, and I also had gloves on. So I wore some just glove liner gloves. They're nice and light. I wore those for about half the race. And then also had a sweatshirt and sweatpants that I threw off before the start of the race. So let's talk about getting to the race and those logistics real quick, because I think that's a huge piece of race morning success. Everything I read and saw said get to the race about 90 to 2 hours prior to the race start. So if my wave was going off at 7:30, that was the first wave. So that's saying about 5:30 to 6 to arrive. So I left our hotel at 5:45. It was about a 15-minute walk. It was so cool. I mean, Chicago, I can't say how awesome of a race it was, but there was so many people in the morning. Like, there was such an energy and such a buzz at 5:30, 5:45 in the morning, starting literally from when I got out of the elevator into the hotel lobby, which was so cool. So it was dark out. It was cold too, like perfect race conditions, which I'll get to in a sec, but it was cold in the morning. And one mistake I made, which I cannot believe, because I run really cold, I'm always cold, is I was cold before the race. I had a sweatshirt, I had sweatpants, but I should have just brought another layer. It's way better to be hot and you can just take stuff off that you're going to throw away and donate anyway, than to be cold, which I was. I wasn't like shivering, freezing, but I was cold. And I think if you're going for the first time, you're not quite sure like what you can wear, what you can't, whatever. You can always throw stuff to the side. And at these big races, they're usually donated. You can also just like hold your stuff for the first few miles. If you plan to see your family or friends, toss it to them. That's what I did with my cell phone that I had on me for the first few miles, because I actually caught a Lyft scooter on the way to the start line. So I wanted to have the phone to be able to get that scooter. So I arrived at Grant Park about 90 minutes before my start time, so 6 a.m. I'm really glad I did, because there was tons of people trying to get into the park from all waves. So this is the first wave, so you have people for all waves trying to get in, and I waited for about 30 to 40 minutes in line just to get into the park. They check everybody's bag, they check what you have on you, they make sure you're not taking anything you can't take into the park. So there's checkpoints to get in. You can't just walk in. So I waited in line for 30 plus minutes. One little note on Chicago is they don't let you take like water bottles in. So I was sipping on some Noon before. They don't let you take those in. Mine was like a small bottle. I just put it in my pocket and walked past them and kept drinking it. So I guess that's illegal, but it worked for me. So just keep that in mind, that if you have a big Gatorade bottle or something, even if it was, I saw even unclosed or unopened containers, they weren't letting people take in. So keep that in mind if you're doing Chicago specifically there. 90 minutes before was honestly perfect. Why? Is because I was able to wait in line, no worries. I got in, I was chilling. I still had about an hour before the race when I got in, and I was able to go wait in a bathroom line, not be stressing about getting to my corral. And the corral closed at 7:20, 10 minutes before race start. And I got in there about 7:15. Cut it a little close, but I knew I'd make it. It was all good. Got into my corral, and we were rocking and rolling, man. So that was all the logistics getting to the race. The weather on race day was perfect. I mean, I feel like everybody I saw or heard from that ran the race ran a PR. Chicago's a fast course by nature, of course, and the weather couldn't have been more beautiful. A slight wind, but nothing too crazy. It was about 50 degrees, 47 to 50 degrees, sunny, just in a drop dead perfect race morning. That's probably why a world record was set on that day, which was, really cool to be there for as well. It was a little chilly at the start, like I said. So I wore gloves for probably the first half of the race, first 90 minutes or so. I do run really cold. I got Raynaud's, so like my hands get all crazy and white if they're a little too cold. And so I like wearing gloves. One little note on gloves, and I messed this up at Boston this year. And I want to make a note here for a little better execution that I experienced in Chicago is when I was running to aid stations with my gloves on in Boston, I would keep my gloves on, I would grab a water or a Gatorade and drink it or whatever, and my gloves just got soaked, like completely soaked, and they were just wet the whole race, which it kind of defeats the purpose of wearing gloves. Chicago, I was so clean with it. I took my gloves off to take goos and then also to get water and Gatorade at aid stations, kept my gloves dry, kept them not sticky, which I hate sticky hands. It's the worst. And I would just throw my glove back on afterwards. Nothing better than maybe your hand's just a little wet and then you get that nice warm glove back on your hands afterwards. So just a little weird tidbit there. Let's talk about the course. I did a ton of research for Chicago beforehand because I was used to running Boston as my major marathon race. And Boston is very logistically challenging. I'll say that. There's so much to know about Boston to run a really good race. And I was expecting the same with Chicago, but it just wasn't the case. I mean, you look up Chicago tip videos. The dog wants to go outside. Chicago tip videos on YouTube, and there's like almost nothing out there. I mean, I would look at the tips, and they were like general marathon tips, but nothing course specific. Just not a lot out there. And the fact is, there's not a ton to know about the Chicago course. It's a very, very flat course. It's a loop, so you're just going basically from point to point. If there is any wind or anything, you'll get it back. If you go out of the city and you come back, you'll get a tailwind and then a headwind. So there's not a ton to know about the course. Here's a few things I'll say. Number one is a lot of people warned me about GPS not working, and that was totally real. My GPS, I started it right at the start. All the tall buildings and everything downtown, you're going under in tunnels. My GPS didn't kick in until like mile 10. I mean, I had my total time on there and I knew what time splits I roughly wanted to hit. But I mean, my watch buzzed at like mile 10 and it was like GPS ready. And from there on, I had a pretty accurate GPS. But I mean, my watch was basically useless for over an hour of the race. So just keep that in mind. Have an idea of what splits you want to hit. If they're very specific down to, I break them up by 5Ks. Just write them on your arm or something, I guess. I didn't do that. I just kind of, did some rough estimates. And honestly, I kind of like seeing what time I have on my watch at what split and then doing a little math in my head. It kind of keeps me busy for, a few minutes out there. Another thing I'll say, this helped me a ton. There is a blue line on the course. That's the tangent line for the entire course, meaning the shortest distance from start to finish. And I ran on that blue line the entire race. Like, it was so cool to have where I didn't have to think about anything. I didn't have to think about what turns were coming up. I just followed that blue line and, it worked out really well. I didn't run much further than I had to. At Boston, it's such a meandering course and there's no blue line, obviously, for the whole course. I ended up running almost a half mile extra, right? Which adds up to, even if you're running 6-minute miles, that's an extra 2-3 minutes to your total marathon time. So running the tangent is important, and it's really cool at Chicago. They have that blue line to follow. So I just cruised on the blue line. Talking about paces, I was not sure what I could run. It's a weird feeling to have going into a race where usually you're pretty confident in what your race pace can be based on all your workouts up to that point. But I was coming into the race off 6 weeks of sporadic training because of this, IT band leg issue. So I knew I was still really fit. I probably wasn't in my best shape. I wasn't in my best shape, but I knew I was still really fit. So my plan coming out was to run about 6:40 pace, see how that felt, and basically just run the rest of the race based on how those first 5 to 10 miles went at 6:40. And I actually nailed those paces, which is so funny. The first half of the race, I ran in 1:26:55, which is 6:38 minute per mile pace. But the great thing about that was I got to halfway and I was like, I'm holding back. 100%. I have so much left in the tank, which is, you want to feel that way, or you want to feel that you're running at a great pace. If you get to halfway and you're feeling like I don't know if I can hold this pace, I am just holding on at this point, that's a bad feeling to have. And I've had that feeling before. So I felt so awesome halfway through. I saw roughly the split. I felt like I ran about 127, and I was doing some math in my head. I'm like, okay, I think I could run, 125. I could pick up the pace here, and that's, 252. That's a great time for me. So 126.55, basically 127 first half of the race, but I knew I had so much in the tank, and I started turning it on little by little there. I did have in the back of my mind, I understand marathon to the point where I understand it's a long race, and you can feel great for 18 miles, you can feel great for 22 miles, and you can feel horrible for 4.2 miles. So I kept that in mind. I knew that my fortunes could flip, but it got to a point, maybe mile 16, where I just realized, hey man, I feel so good. It's time to turn it up a little bit. And that's such an incredible feeling to understand that you've run a great race up to this point. You've put yourself in a position to run really well the rest of the race, and then you just go for it. And you're not, I didn't look at my watch darn near the whole second half of the race. I was just running. And I ran, a fantastic second half of my race. My fastest half marathon split ever in a marathon, 1:24:09. That's 6:25 minute per mile pace. And I know, I got that in me. I got that in me for a whole race. I know I'll get there where that's, 2:48:18. I got that in the bag for sure in future races. One thing I'll say is I did some math in my head with about 10 miles to go, and I was like, 250, sub 250 is like in my sights. And I was grinding to get under 250. That's been my marathon goal for over a year. I know I had that fitness at Boston, just, a few things probably could have went my way a little bit better, and I got it. I know I got that fitness. So I went for it hard. I ran around a 39-minute last 10K, which is fast for me for even just a normal 10K. And I just ran a fantastic race, a 3-minute negative split for me. And based on coming into the race unsure of my health, it couldn't have worked out better. So that was the pacing. Finished at 2:51:06. That's a 6:32 minute per mile pace. Chicago is the real deal for a few reasons. The crowd is fantastic from start to finish. The course was lined with people, and I know people have said before Chinatown, kind of that western part of the race, miles 16 to 20, it gets a little quiet. I didn't even notice. There was so many people, and it was so cool to be a part of that day and that race. I never thought a race would rival Boston in terms of pedigree and experience for me, but Chicago's right up there. There's a reason it's a world major, and it was fantastic, even down to the volunteers at the end who were so kind and so nice and so complimentary. Hey, chill. So complimentary and encouraging. It was, and energetic. It was so fantastic. And I know that's you're not the only person they're seeing on that day. They're seeing tens of thousands of people, and they're, bringing the energy for everybody, which was so, so cool. Talking about nutrition, I messed up a little bit, actually. This was a little bit of an oversight on my part, and notes for next time, because I I feel like I've always been over prepared in terms of what I bring on me for nutrition. And I kind of messed this up this time around. So I carried 6 goos on me. I like Goo brand gels. They have about 25 grams of carbs in each. They have some sodium. You can get the Roctane ones too that have amino acids and caffeine and more sodium in them. So I had a couple of those on me as well. So I had 6 gels on me. I took one right before the start of the race, about 10 minutes before. So that left me with 5 gels for the entire race, which is probably one too short. And my plan is to take one every 30 minutes. So I took one 10 minutes before, 30 minutes in, an hour 30 in, but then the frequency got a little smaller. So I took one at an hour 50 and I took one at 2 hours and 10 minutes. And then at about 2:25, I wanted one more for kind of that last push, and I didn't have any more, which is like, it's not like the worst feeling in the whole wide world, but it is like a damn, I just wish I would have taken one more on my person, you know? So I did not have a gel for that last 30 minutes. So I just tried to compensate with more Gatorade. I took a Gatorade at pretty much every aid station going into the home stretch, except for maybe the last 1 or 2 where I was just powering through. And this is huge. I can't recommend this enough. If you have family, friends, anybody there to support you at the race, I gave them, actually, I shouldn't say I gave them. My friend, come here. My friend Dave made these for me. I had 2 bottles. I love getting just the Sport Top water bottles from a gas station. You know, Life Water has great ones with like the little just sport nozzle. It's really easy to sip on and consume during a race versus screwing off the screw top and you have that big hole that you have to drink out of. So he got me 2 of those. He put 2 scoops of Tailwind in each. So that's another 50 grams of carbs, another 600 milligrams of sodium, and a ton of fluid. The one thing in these races is if you're just getting fluid from aid stations, you're not getting a ton of fluid in your body throughout the course of the race. I know that's important. I would honestly rather fight through a little discomfort of my belly being a little even full and sloshing with water and fluid than being so depleted from that I'm cramping, struggling down the stretch of a race. So at about mile 12, I got 1 bottle from them and I drank like as much as I could of that thing. I probably held on to it for over a mile, maybe 10 minutes, sipping on it occasionally, taking some big gulps, trying to get as much as I could stomach in my stomach without completely overloading myself and had that sloshing feeling. So I took in a bunch. I do that during training runs too. So it's not like this is, you know, a race day thing only. I practice this and I work on taking in a ton of fluid during training runs to be a little better prepared during the race. I took another one of those bottles at around mile 17, and that was huge too. Same thing. I drank about 3/4 of it, so maybe 16 ounces of water. So that's about 40 grams of carbs, about 400 to 500 milligrams of sodium that I got extra in my body. Those 2 are huge. I can't recommend that enough. And if you have the means to make that happen, I highly recommend you do. It's huge to get that fluid in. Hey, stop. Dog is freaking out. So I think that's about the end of the video here. Last thing I want to say is I can't recommend the Chicago Marathon enough. It's, I know, huge. Bailey, come here. It's huge for first-time marathoners. I know they have a big lottery system, and it's open right now. So go, if you're looking to do a marathon, you're not sure which one to do, Chicago's easy to get to. It's cheap to get to. Go apply for the Chicago Marathon. It'll be a fantastic first marathon experience. I feel so blessed to have been able to run it, and I just had a fantastic experience. That's it for the video. That's the Chicago race recap. If you like this video, if you like this video, please subscribe. It's huge. Will help grow this channel. I want to keep pumping out quality running, lifting, reading content. And that's it. I really appreciate you watching. Go run the Chicago Marathon, and we'll see you on the next video. Peace. Holla.
What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars.